Hello and welcome to the channel. Today's video is a little bit different, and if you're new here, my name is Mel and I am a yarn dyer living on the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland. Today's video I'm going to be talking about things you can do with your yarn advent mini skeins that you get in yarn advent calendars, and also if you have mini skeins from or scraps left over from other projects lying around too. These things that I'm going to suggest will also be valid for that. Also, I'm not going to be talking about scrappy blankets. A lot of projects that people do with their yarn advent calendars will be things like scrappy blankets, and I can guarantee if I start making a scrap yarn blanket or any blanket, I will never finish it. I've tried crochet blankets, starting those, and they just never get finished, so there will be no blankets in this video. I have my coffee ready, I have my notes which are relatively extensive, and I will be talking about garments, accessories and a few shawls, not so many shawls, mostly garments, and there will be mostly knitting and some crochet in there. And there will also be some yarn projects that involve DK weight yarns and not just fingering weight yarns, because you can get yarn advent calendars obviously in DK weight as well, so I will be including some of those too. First up, I'm going to start with garments, I think, and I will kick off with the one that I will be using a yarn advent for this year, because we're coming up to the beginning of December next week, and I will be making the Bubble Cardigan by Stephen West. This one is a fingering weight yarn cardigan, and it is knit in stripes, and you can use as many colours as you would like. I will be using them in a block fades, so I've kind of grouped them into similar toned colours, and I will take one from each pile of those tones and I will make a fade in a section, and then I will make another section and another section, and that's how I'm going to work my bubble cardigan, although you could use a complete fade all the way through the cardigan too. I suspect you would need 20g mini skeins for this, a 20g mini skein advent calendar, and a main colour also for all of the ribbing and the cuffs and so on. I'm actually going to be using part of my main colour, which is a gold, in the stripes also. So between each fade block I'll be putting in a stripe even of the gold. And yeah, so that is my first suggestion for yarn advent. Next up is the sweater, which I was originally going to be using my yarn advent for. The advent I'm using is from a couple of years ago, and it is a fingering weight yarn, but this garment, the Cat Vent sweater by let me just check, it is Marna Gilligan, and it is worked with DK weight yarn. And I was going to do something which I also suggest if you wanted to do a DK weight item, is I was going to hold my yarn double, so either 2 mini skeins together, or if you want to keep the colours as they are, would be to wind into a centre pull ball or cake and pull both ends and knit the yarn double. It will make a heavy DK weight, almost bordering on a worsted weight, but it would work if you wanted to keep it and use a fingering weight mini skeins for a DK weight item. But yes, that will be the Cat Vent sweater, and for this you would need a contrast main colour of yarn for the collar and the sleeves, and also a contrast for the little cat colourwork designs, which I'm just going to use undyed yarn. But again, this is something that you could use those DK weight mini skeins for in the body. Speaking of colourwork, colourwork is a really good way of using up some of those mini skeins, and I have a few colourwork garment suggestions before I'll move on to something a little less complicated. But if you did want to really challenge yourself, you could use certainly a fingering weight, but I mean the Cat Vent is a DK weight, so you can use a DK weight obviously in colourwork, but fingering weight is, I think it works up nicer in a fingering weight yarn, colourwork does. So 3 suggestions are from Marie Wallen. There is the Unst cardigan, the Chestnut cardigan and the Orkney cardigan. because I live in Orkney, would be 3 suggestions, but Marie Wallen has several colourwork garment items, and most of them use a good 10, 11, 12 colours in the colourwork anyway. And if you are getting, say if you would normally knit a cardigan and it would take, say, 400 grams of fingering weight yarn, then you can kind of work out, well, I would need, calculating in my brain, a 20-gram mini skein advent calendar would quite comfortably make a colourwork fingering weight garment, and you could mix and match your mini skeins to make that colourwork work. I suspect this would work better with semi-solid minis, but speckle yarns would work perfectly well as well, but it would make much more of a subtle colourwork garment than if you had, say, a rainbow fade or some such, and you could kind of mix your colours as to how you would like them. Or even if you had a 10-gram mini skein set, 240 grams worth, you could use a contrast single, like 200 grams worth of another colour, and use that to contrast all of the colours, or as best as possible, and again make a fingering weight garment in that way. You could also do a fingering weight colourwork garment like the academic sweater by Ellie of Skein, which doesn't have sleeves, so you would use up less yarn. And I just checked my notes, yeah, you could use 10-gram minis and a main colour background for that, because it is one background colour with all the different colourwork designs in the vest, like a tank top vest. Or you could use 20-gram mini skeins again and kind of mix and match them and make it more stripy rather than one block colour and then the colourwork design. So moving on from colourwork sweaters and moving on to something a little bit less complicated, we have a couple of options: stripes or non-stripes. Stripes, I do have a couple of suggestions for. 2 sweaters, both by, let me just check, Vera Valimaki. The Breathing Space sweater and the Confetti sweater. Both of them have very thin stripes in amongst a solid or semi-solid sweater. So you could use a 10-gram fingering weight advent set to make all of the mini stripes. I suspect you could possibly get away with 5-gram minis, possibly 2, especially on the, well, either of them, because I think there are only 2 or 3 rows of each stripe. So you could use 1 stripe in each of the micro skeins. Yeah, I think 5. I think you would probably get away with 5-gram ones. I know you don't get many of the 5-gram micro skein sets, but 10 grams would definitely be plenty for this. And then you would just need a main colour for the cuffs and the chunky bit on the top of the Breathing Space sweater, and so on. So that would be another option. I've also seen that, now this isn't a pattern as such, and this is actually somebody's project. I'm going to put a photo up on here where they used a regular pattern and then used a yarn advent in a fade very cleverly, and this was done with the Boxy sweater by Hoki Locatelli, and again using a main colour for kind of the blocky sections, so like the bottom band and the cuffs and so on, and then made an entire fade on a boxy sweater on the main square section of the body. Looked really effective with a contrast colour for the block sections too, and I really like this project, and I'm tempted in the future to make something very similar myself, because I just think it looks so effective and really quite nice. I'm just going to mention a few crochet designs here, because I think crochet can sometimes be forgotten about when it comes to using up these yarn advents. You always think of maybe it's a granny stripe blanket or granny square blankets and things like that, but there is the option of making something like, oh, let me just remember the name. There is a cardigan by Fran Morgan called A Good Vintage Cardigan, which admittedly is granny stripe, but this has been in my favourites on Ravelry for quite some time, and usually I'm not the biggest fan of crocheted garments, not since I took up knitting over crochet. I just like the smoother fabric that you get from knitting, but I do really like this design cardigan and the way that the stripes have been used with the, like, again, like the knitted garments, with this kind of main colour to help tie it all in. With this one you could actually do the granny stripes with the mini skeins again and have the contrast yarn. Say often mini yarn adverts will have a full-size skein for like Christmas morning. Not all, mine that I have ordered before in the past haven't, but you can often get a yarn that complements the mini skein set that you have ordered too, or just any other skein or skeins from Stash or elsewhere, somewhere else, would work for this. Of course, you could go down the lines of a crocheted shawl, and there are a few nice designs out there, lots of nice designs out there actually. A few that spring to mind would be the Tega shawl and the Secret Paths shawl, both by Johanna Lindell, I think that's pronounced right, and the Tega is a DK weight and I adore this design, and the Secret Paths is a 4-ply fingering weight design, and you could probably use 10-gram mini skeins for both of these because 240 grams is usually enough for a shawl. Fingering weight, maybe with DK weight, the 20-gram one would be better, or say the 10-gram mini skeins with a little bit of extra scraps left over from elsewhere would work too. I'm struggling with my light today, so if it seems a little, the lighting is off a little, it's because I am using one of my tripod lights, and it, because the light is fluctuating so bad outside today, sometimes it looks really bright and sometimes it looks really dull. It is a very dull, dreek, heavy rain sort of day out there, so I'm kind of struggling for light. Speaking of shawls, I will just mention a couple of knitted shawls, but I'm not going to go too much into those because a lot of people will recommend scrappy blankets and shawl designs. So there is many out there. There is so many shawl designs out there that you could use a fade in, but two that spring to mind that would work really well for minis would be the Painting Bricks shawl by Stephen West, and that one you could use 10-gram minis and 200 grams worth of contrast yarn. In the original design he uses black for the contrast yarn for the outline of the bricks, but any sort of solid or semi-solid or solid colour would work well, provided there is enough contrast, or maybe it's complementary, you know, depending on the look you were going for, with the minis then used for the little bricks in the design. It is a stunning pattern which I would love to make at some point. Another shawl would be the Calico Quilt shawl by, oh, how am I going to pronounce that? Samantha Troyer, maybe. And this one uses, I haven't wrote it down, so I'm assuming it's 4-ply. And you can, oh yes, I remember which one this one looks like. This one has the triangles, lots of different shapes of triangles. And it was designed as a mystery knit along for a yarn advent a few years ago. I think it was 2018, 2019, and it uses 10-gram minis to make a shawl size, or if you wanted to go all out you can use 20-gram minis and make it a big, as they call a shanklet, a shawl blanket, a big wraparound shawl with 20-gram minis, and I think that would be absolutely stunning, and it would look really nice as a shawl design too with 10-gram minis. It's something that little bit different, it's not just squares or stripes or something like that, so that I think is a really nice design. Also, pretty much most Stephen West designs, thinking about it, would probably work for minis. So yeah, any that you really like you could probably use. Okay, I'm going to move on to accessories now. These are ones you could definitely use things like 5-gram micro skeins or 10-gram minis for, or even using your 20-gram minis and making more than one item, obviously. Some more simple than others. First up is the Burra, is that right? Yes, the Burra cowl by Marie Wallen, which is a colourwork cowl. again, the same way with the colourwork sweaters, mix and match your minis to kind of have them contrast each other, and again would work better with semi-solids than variegated and speckled yarns. But you know, you can, there's no reason why you can't use variegated and speckled yarns in colourwork. It's just long as you have that contrast between your two colours in that particular area of colourwork, then they will show up. And again, if they're not contrasting enough, all it'll do is make a very subtle colourwork item. There is no hard and fast rules, although I would say there are specific hard and fast rules in Fair Isle, but rules are there to be broken. Also, along similar lines would be the Georgia Tam, again by Marie Wallen, and it is a free pattern and it is a DK weight colourwork pattern, and it only uses 100 grams total weight of yarn. So using 5 gram micro skeins would work really, really well for this. But again, if you were to say make a matching tam and cowl, you could probably get away with using the 10 gram minis, or certainly enough with 20 gram mini skeins to make both. Something a little simpler would be the Painting Waves cowl. Again, there seems to be a lot of Stephen West designs here, but he does use lots and lots of colours in an item. So the Painting Waves cowl by Stephen West, it has these narrow waving stripes, which you can then use with a contrast yarn, background yarn, say again with a full-size skein that comes with an advent set or something else from Stash, or just alternating mini skein stripes. For example, you could split a yarn advent into 2 piles, say all the blues and greens and all the reds and pinks and things like that, and have them alternating stripes throughout. So fade from the blues to the greens to the purples, and say fade from the pinks to the orange to the yellow, whatever, and then have those 2 fades run alongside each other in the cowl. I think would look really cool. And you could also do, say, 2 rainbow fades, but have them fade in opposite directions to each other, or follow on from each other a third of the way around, or some random thing like that would work really nicely if you didn't want to use a single contrast yarn between the stripes. Apologies if you can hear rustling, I keep fiddling with my notebook here. The last project I am going to suggest is actually a pair of socks, and that is the Pixel Rise socks by, I can't find the name, Kemper Ray, which you could use 5 gram minis or scraps, or for example when you have made a yarn advent item and you have little scraps left over from doing so, you could make these socks also to kind of like have a, I don't know, like a commemorative pair of Christmas advent socks without it just being your typical stripy socks. I have made advent socks with my yarn advents before in the past, and I think I've made like 4 rounds in each colour for both socks, or something along those lines. And instead of doing that, you're doing something like a Pixel Rise sock, which I believe is a colourwork sock, a very simple one. I think the colours just kind of fade into each other. Would be a nice way of using up scraps as well as micro skeins too. So I hope these ideas have kind of made you think a little bit out of the box when it comes to advents, and not just your typical scrappy blankets, and just think of things that you wouldn't automatically associate with many colours in one project. So yeah, I hope this is helpful and give you a little bit of inspiration. I will be casting on my advent bubble cardigan very soon. I have swatched for it on 2 different needle sizes just to check what I like for my fabric, and that's pretty much ready to go. I just need to finish a sock I'm currently working on, and I can be knitting on through that through December. It is an old advent, not one from this year, so that I can crack on whenever I feel like it and just enjoy knitting with Christmas yarns through the Christmas period, rather than the pressure to knit for things to get ready for Christmas, if that makes sense. So I am, yes, really looking forward to my Christmas knitting. is there any admin stuff? I have a podcast probably coming out next week, and I will be having Vlogmas videos coming out in December at some frequency I'm not entirely sure of at the moment, but there will be Vlogmas. Also, it is the holiday sales weekend coming up. Actually, thinking about it, this is something I wanted to speak about, and I'll speak about briefly. If you're watching this after Black Friday weekend, I do apologise, but it kind of is still relevant. And it was something I was going to mention on Instagram, but I will actually mention on here. There's a lot of talk in small business circles about boycotting holiday sales, whether that be Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales and focusing on Small Business Saturday, or boycotting Boxing Day sales or New Year sales, or whatever sales it is, and that big corporations just get lots of money out of it and so on and so forth. And the ability to boycott traditional sales times for small businesses, I think, can be a little bit, I think it's all very well and good if you are a small business that has a large amount of sales all year round. You have, say, a shop update and your items sell out within a day or less, if you're some dyers, within an hour or less. But if you are a smaller small business, then holiday sales come around at a time when you don't make as many sales generally. Like in the winter, November, December, January and so on. Sales tend to slow down over the winter period for small businesses unless you are really super popular big small business. So yeah, I don't know where I'm really going with that, but I think there shouldn't be that pressure. If you have a small business, don't feel that pressure to boycott the holiday sales. If those holiday sales are going to bring you in a big chunk of sales that you would not have had otherwise, because business is slow at this time of the year, if you have a holiday sale, it can bring you in some sales in at a time of year when you would not be getting that business. So don't feel that pressure to follow the trend of, oh, let's boycott Black Friday sales sort of thing. And this is something I felt myself when I was thinking about having a sale over the Black Friday weekend. It was, suddenly I'm seeing posts from other dyers or other small businesses saying, oh, we should, because like a big business and corporation and blah 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 blah, we should boycott the holiday sales and so on and so forth. But for me as a small business, and relatively small fry compared to the big designers and the big dyers, it is a time when those sales can help. Does that make sense? I've kind of babbled on a little bit here, but so all that's to say, I will be having a sale on over Black Friday weekend from Friday through to Monday, and I will be just doing it automatic on the Etsy shop, so there's no code needed or anything like that. So I will be back next week with a regular podcast episode, and I shall speak to you all soon. Bye bye.